host on Blaze TV, and she's going to have a fireside chat, a one-on-one with our Secretary of Education. So will you give a warm welcome to Alice Stuckey now?
My name is Ali Stuckey. I am so glad to be here. Thank you so much for coming. I am excited to have the honor to interview someone that I really admire, Betsy DeVos, the 11th Secretary of Education. Secretary DeVos has dedicated 30 years of her life to education reform, and I know all of us are going to gain a lot of insight from the conversation that we're about to have today. So please help me in welcoming Secretary Betsy DeVos. Well, Secretary, thank you so much for being here. I know everyone here is so excited to hear from you. Can you first talk about something that I know that you're very passionate about, the administration is passionate about, education freedom. Why is that important to children and their parents, and what does it really mean?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to join you and to talk a little bit about the work that President Trump and our administration have been doing to ensure that families have the opportunity to have their child and children educated in the way that they want them educated. And education freedom in that vein means the ability for children in their K-12 years for parents and those children to find the right fit for them. We know every child is special and unique. They learn differently. There are different things that interest them, that excite them, and yet too many kids today are forced to be in places, in schools that simply aren't the right fit and aren't working for them. So broadly speaking, education freedom empowers families to make a different choice and find that fit.
Can you tell me about the Education Freedom Scholarships, scholarship program?
Absolutely. So there are a number of states across the country, and maybe many of you live in states that have passed legislation, created policies that empower families in your state to find that fit for K-12 education. We have an initiative at the federal level which is meant to come alongside of what states are doing and give rocket fuel to those efforts. It creates a federal tax credit, and states would decide whether they wanted to voluntarily participate in the funds of that tax credit, and if so, they would name one or more scholarship granting organizations that would then receive voluntary contributions from federal taxpayers, either individuals or businesses, directly into those scholarship funds, which would then directly empower parents and children to take those scholarships and find the right fit for their education.
Can you tell me any other ways that your department and this administration is trying to empower children and their parents? Because that's really what it's all about. To me, that sounds like a no-brainer. You face a lot of obstacles in your job, but what are some other ways that you overcome those obstacles and that you're actually able to empower families?
Well, we think that education freedom is really the biggest way and the biggest change in what we've done. So let me just take a step back and talk a little bit about the fact that too many kids today are not able to live up to their full potential because they're in an education setting that simply doesn't work for them. The nation's report card, the NAEP results, just came out a few months ago. This is done every 2 years, and for the last 2 decades, basically, we have seen zero improvement in the achievement gap between those students performing at the lowest end of the achievement spectrum and those at the highest end. And yet, in 40 years, we've spent over $1 trillion at the federal level alone trying to, with the specific goal of closing that achievement gap. So our contention is we have to do something radically different, and we believe that directly empowering families, those closest to the children, those who know the children best, to make that decision to find that right venue, that right fit for their child, is an important step in that direction. And so all of our policies, while this is a proposal in Congress for legislation, everything we're doing at the department, first of all, within the bounds of the law, is trying to ensure that those most close to the children have the most flexibility. So a good example of another step that we're taking that we hope that Congress will embrace is part of our budget proposal is to block grant the elementary and secondary education funds that are expended at the federal level, to block grant those to the states and then they to the local districts to decide where to deploy those resources to best meet the needs of the kids closest to them right in those districts.
An issue that I think about a lot, I really care about, and I know that everyone in this audience cares about, is religious liberty in education. Can you tell me what your department and this administration are doing in the way of religious liberty in education?
Well, this has been a huge issue for the president and for us at the Department of Education. Recently, the president signed an executive order regarding prayer in schools and basically clarifying and restating what we all know to be the case under the First Amendment, that we should be able to freely express our faith. And so we know that we know too many schools, too many districts, and frankly, in some cases, states have been they have not allowed for that free expression of students in their, whether it be to pray before their lunch or to have a club with some of their fellow students after school. We have restated what some of those freedoms are, and we have also further required that every district make it clear to families within their district what the process is if you feel that free expression has been impinged upon, what the process is to raise that issue, and then for states to report that issue to us so we're aware of where these impingements or these infringements are going on. That's one area that I think is really important, and we know that for too many families in too many places, they have felt that their children have not been able to grow in their own values and faith because of either implicit or explicit prohibitions in their schools. And so this was, I think, an important restatement of that priority and that principle. We've also made clear, as a result of a Supreme Court case 2 years ago, the Trinity Lutheran case, we've also made clear that religious institutions need to be on equal footing with other institutions when it comes to contractual services and issues that districts may enter into, that there needs to be an equal footing for every organization, and that they not be denied that opportunity to bid for those or to participate in those simply because of their religious nature. We've also recently restated the fact, again based on this Trinity Lutheran decision, that HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, part of there's a fund at the federal level for building construction at these HBCUs. They were previously denied the opportunity if their mission was a faith-based mission. They were denied access to that capital fund. That has been changed and corrected, and they can indeed access the capital fund. We have eliminated what was referred to as the list of shame, and that was a list maintained at the Department of Education for any institution that applied for, that had, because of their religious mission, did not participate or did not have to observe certain parts of the Title IX regulation and rule. And that list was maintained there. We have done away with that. There is not a discrimination against religious institutions in that regard.
And so this isn't just K through 12. This is higher education as well, correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yes. I mean, everywhere we have the opportunity to either restate or clarify what we should, what should be the case under the first important amendment to our Constitution. We are doing so, and we are, proud and happy to be able to do that, to allow for everybody who is driven by their faith and motivated by their faith to have that opportunity to freely and clearly exercise it and practice it.
There is a case before the Supreme Court right now regarding Blaine Amendments, and you were actually present for those oral arguments. Can you tell us what's going on there?
So this is another really important case that the Supreme Court is considering. About 150 years ago, there was a very blatant attempt to discriminate against Catholics, and it was attempted to be Catholics and Catholic education. It was attempted to be a federal amendment that failed at the federal level. So James Blaine, who was then the Speaker of the House, succeeded in getting these amendments adopted in 37 different states. So at the state level, this has precluded many initiatives around education freedom because of these amendments. And so the Supreme Court has heard a case called Espinoza versus Montana. The state of Montana implemented an education freedom program, a tax credit scholarship program, and then the Supreme Court in Montana basically negated that program or shut it down because they said it violated the Blaine Amendment there. And the plaintiffs in this case are a number of parents who sought to access these tax credit scholarship funds in Montana and have their children attend a faith-based school somewhere of their choosing in Montana. And their contention is that this amendment, which was a blatantly bigoted, discriminatory move, that is still on the books in 37 different states, that this has precluded their opportunity for their children to access an education that aligns with their values. So the Supreme Court heard this case in January. It's going to be decided in this spring term, and this is a really important one to watch because it will have broad implications for state efforts across the country to bring more education freedom to families there.
Something that you are determined to do, something that you're passionate about, is reduce federal influence or the federal role in education. You've touched on this already, but can you just reiterate why that's so important to reduce that role?
Well, we are strongly supportive of the notion of federalism, and that states are where it's at when it comes to education policy. And frankly, the states and local communities are what primarily fund K-12 education. Only 5%, 5 to 7%, depending on the year and depending on how you measure it, 5 to 7% of all funding for education comes from the federal level, yet all of the regulatory burden and all of the imposition, I would say, on a lot of what happens in states and communities is because of the federal government. And so to the extent that we can support policy and encourage congressional action to continue to move those decisions and that power and flexibility back to the state and local level, we are doing so. Congress passed a law a few years ago called the Every Student Succeeds Act. It took a good and important step in that direction again. And we are proposing this year with our budget that all of the funds at the federal level for K-12 education be pooled together and block granted back to states and local communities to deploy them in the way that they know will best address the needs of students in their communities, in their states. And I think of an example I've cited a few times. I visited Alaska last August and went to a whole bunch of different schools and communities there, including a very remote village in the Arctic Circle. And I observed there that we could not be more geographically apart from students in Miami than we are in Kivalina, Alaska. And the needs of students in Kivalina, Alaska vary greatly from those in Miami, Florida. And yet the federal government has in too many ways imposed its will and its cookie cutter approach on students across this country. And so our contention is we need to move that back to the states and local districts and communities to make those decisions that are important and best made right there for the kids that they're serving.
One problem that my generation, the millennials, face, and the generation after me, Generation Z, is the student loan debt crisis. So can you talk about what this administration is doing to address that?
Well, this is a big issue for a lot of individual students, and I would argue it's a really big issue to contend with for our nation. Just in the last 10 years, student loan debt has ballooned over $1 trillion. It was about $500 billion in 2009, and it is now $1.5 billion. And there's a lot of, obviously a lot of perspective and opinion about what needs to be done or what should be done. What we have been doing and what we can do without congressional action is help to provide students with a lot more tools and information so that hopefully prospectively they make more discerning, wiser decisions. And some of the tactical things that we've done started with putting the federal student aid form on a mobile app called My Student Aid. If you haven't seen it and if you have students or you know students who have to fill out this FAFSA, I recommend getting it. But importantly, adding to that app is more information now in what's called the College Scorecard that will give students the ability to compare by field of study or program the cost of going to school A versus school B versus school C, and importantly also what my first year earning potential is after I graduate from that program at school A, school B, or school C. And this is the first time that this kind of information has been available at your fingertips for students and frankly parents to be able to help in that conversation with students to compare that information. We have just this week added some more tools and features so that a student looking at a particular school can simulate what their loan story is likely to be and you know what the implications are for them. So this is one important area, providing a lot more transparency to the whole costs around different schools and different programs. And Another area that we have proposed as part of our budget proposal for this year is capping the amount that graduate students can borrow. Currently, there's no limit on the amount that one can borrow for graduate school. And I would say that there are there's 800,000 students today who have borrowed more than $200,000. Many of them are going to have a difficult, if not impossible, time repaying that. There have also been a lot of parents that have taken out Parent Plus loans, which have also been uncapped. We have made the recommendation to cap that off for parents as well. Because if the goal is to really help and support undergraduate students to pursue an education in a four-year institution, then that's where we should be focusing, I think, most of the attention and supports for resources. We have also, I lost my train of thought, and I'm thinking of the other thing that I wanted to make sure to bring out. Again, making a lot more information available to students and bringing transparency to what schools, what they have to offer, I'm hopeful also will bring about laudable results in what schools discontinue or double down on in terms of offering for students. Here's what I was going to say. President Trump has, and our administration have also been very intentional about supporting multiple pathways to a successful adult career and adult lifelong learning journey. And part of our budget proposal this year also includes increasing expenditures around career and technical education. And this is a very important area for us to continue to support and highlight, because today we know there are over 7 million jobs going unfilled, many of which don't require a four-year degree, but require some kind of education beyond high school. So supporting career and technical education, supporting short-term for low-income students, short-term Pell for certificate programs, and recognizing and acknowledging many of these shorter-term programs as very valid and viable options for students to pursue, in partnership, frankly, with employers who are hungrily looking for qualified and capable employees. These are all areas that we have to continue to support and encourage students to look at carefully when they are making their decisions for what to do beyond high school.
This is my final question. Can you tell me how your faith influences the work that you do?
Well, as we talked about this backstage, it basically is foundational to everything that I do. It does inform all of my days, all of my decisions, and I firmly believe, as I know everyone here does, that every single child, every single individual is a uniquely created individual with great potential, and I never forget that. I appreciate and respect every person, even those with whom I disagree, and sometimes it's harder than others to have that perspective, but thankfully I have a helper who's never far away to remind me of that. And I had a verse. There's a little devotional I usually read daily, and today for Ash Wednesday, I really liked the verse from Psalm 145. When I speak, let it be of blessing and gratitude. Let your glory within me shine out to the world. So Psalm 145, verse 12. And I pray that will be how I approach things and how I interact with every uniquely created person that I do on a daily basis.
Well, thank you so much. Yes. Well, thank you for what you do for education freedom, for religious freedom. As a new parent, I am just so glad and comforted to know that there are people like you working in this administration to make sure that the path ahead for kids like mine and the kids of the people that are in this room, that we can trust that there will be people championing religious liberty in education. So thank you so much. And if you guys could just give one more round of applause.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, everyone.